Hey Curio friends, today we have this really fun Santa Claus that we're going to work on today. He's a little bit bigger than our regular canvas, so you might not be able to see all of him at the same time, but he's going to be awesome, great for the holidays and decoration, and as soon as you're done, I know you're going to want to hang it up in your house, and you're going to want to make sure that you take a picture and tag us at Curio Cool. So we're going to start off with our lightest color first. So when you take a look at all the colors in your palette, we're going to start with white. And even though your canvas is white, we do want to still paint all the items that are going to be white with your painting actually white, because what will happen is if we don't, the rest of your picture will have a really nice shine on it because of the way that the acrylic paint dries. And if you don't paint this, it'll just look kind of flat and empty. It'll have more of a matte finish to it. So we are still going to paint areas white, even though they're already white. I would like the very top of my Santa Claus's hat to be this beautiful white color on here. Make it nice and crisp and bright. And I'm always, when I'm painting, remembering to hold my paintbrush up in the shiny part, because that gives me more control while I'm painting. If at any point I'm going too fast for you and you need to pause the video, you're absolutely able to do that. If at any point I'm going too slow and you happen to be done, or you'd just like to race to the end to see what it is you're going to be making, you can always fast forward and rewind and continue on as you need it at your own time, because you don't have to work on this all at the same time. You could feel free to pause it, come back to it another day after different times and parts of your project dry. So you could even work on this over a couple different days if you want to. It doesn't have to be done all at once. In your kit, I packed a square brush for you. Square brushes are nice for when you're doing things that are round, because you can kind of hold it really close and those bristles kind of fan out and help you kind of get a crisp edge, but still also help you with kind of getting part of the inside painted too. So we are using a square brush today. And one thing you want to be careful of is you always want to make sure that you're getting rid of any big thick areas of paint, because we don't want that. We don't want big huge globs, because those could actually crack and break off of your project if they're too thick, or they're just kind of a waste of paint. You're kind of making it really thick when you don't have to be, and you could save some of that paint for another time. All right, I'm also going to do this part for the hat also. Make it look really nice and crisp white, even though I bet Santa's stuff is not as crisp white as it used to be. I'm sure delivering presents to all the different houses would probably get your hat a little bit dirty after going in and out all night. Smoothing out all those big thick areas, making sure that you really take the time to smooth it all out. We always like to start lightest to darkest, because then your water doesn't get as dirty. Make sure you grab yourself some water for when we do switch colors. And then we also can start from lightest to darkest, because if we make some mistakes, if I accidentally go way outside the lines with my white, that's okay. I'm able to kind of finish stuff up as I keep going. So I can kind of fix things and make things more neat and tidy as they go. And you can choose for this video, you could either have Santa's kind of flesh tone come all the way down around the mustache, or if you want to make it look like the start of his beard, then this would all be white down here too. With his nice big jolly white beard. Wonderful. Now that you have your first part done, you can wash your brush off and dry it. We're going to start to do the background next. And for the background, I have planned this really nice green color. You can do many different things while you're working on your background. I'm actually going to turn, I'm working on paper. I always like to work on paper so that I can save all of you the canvases, so I can take those and give those to you with the kit. So I am working on paper today, but you can feel free to turn your canvas at any point in time whenever you need to, so it's closer to you. So when I'm painting the background today, I'm gonna stop and not go off the paper, but you at home should actually continue, and make sure you do that side of your canvas, the top and bottom too, so that you can make sure it's nice and finished so you're ready to hang it on the wall. So the background is going to be this really nice, deep, kind of sagey green color. And for the background, if you want to, you could absolutely just use this green. And I always like to start first by kind of outlining and going right next to my pencil line. That helps to make it so that I don't accidentally start to take over and paint inside of his hat, or, you know, when we get up here, I'm going to trace around the little kind of pom-pom shape, because I don't want to accidentally paint over things that I've already painted. Because this is kind of, now that we've finished the white, every step forward here is going to get a little bit more detailed and kind of be not trickier, but we just want to pay a little bit more attention to each part here as we keep going. Your square brush has two different ways that it can be used. You can hold it flat and it makes a wide line, or if you take your paintbrush and you hold it like this, all of a sudden when you trace right next to your pencil line, when you're holding this up and down or vertically, it makes a little bit of a thinner line. So you can choose with a square brush what feels better to you when you're outlining. Some people like a nice wide outline and they like to hold their brush so that it's always flat. Other people like to hold it vertically like this so that they can get into tinier areas. And if at any point you want a family member to outline for you before you paint, you can always do that too. It helps you to stay inside the lines a little bit better, then that's a good move for you. So this is where your project can get very different from the person beside you or mine. You could choose to paint the entire background this darker green. If you want to, you can use some of your white that you have, and you can add some of your white into the background. And if you don't wash your brush out in between, you can get this really neat kind of impasto, kind of choppy, painterly look with it, where you actually add your white and you add some of the green to it in kind of this choppy X shape. If you've watched any more videos from us, this is something I really like to show because it adds the idea of depth. So it makes it look a little bit more unique, and it gives your eye a little bit more to look at than if you just keep the whole background one flat color. And you can absolutely do that. You don't have to paint in this kind of painterly choppy style if you don't want to. Obviously, some people might like this style and some people might not. It's totally up to you. It's your painting, so you decide what works best for you. But the idea is that you don't mix it to one new different shade of green. You kind of have all of these choppy light greens, dark greens, and different shades in your background as you're going. And it can be really loose, which is why we outline it first, so that it's not so loose that it accidentally starts to get into some of the different areas that you don't want it to get into. And this is a way to really have some fun with it, make it look a little bit more interesting and exciting. The only thing you have to make sure of is that you're adding that white in, if you do it, when your background is still wet, because if you do it when it's dry, it doesn't work. So you're kind of looking to add in those white pieces to your background while it's still wet, and you can kind of blend in those more choppy pieces so they're not quite as bright, or you can leave them. Some people like to see those different areas of white and those different areas of darker green. It's totally up to you. I did X's. You could, if you wanted to, go the same direction the whole time. It's really up to you with how you want your background to look, because it's your picture after all. That's the most important thing, is that you like it. Now that I'm done with my background, I'm going to start to work on the flesh tone of the face. I'm still going to use my square brush, I'm gonna use this little container of this like kind of peachy look to this. I didn't make it too dark. I feel like if I was up in the North Pole where it's colder, I probably wouldn't be outside in the sun too much. So I made the flesh tone a little bit lighter. And again, using your square brush in different ways, you can kind of trace around your eyes. These little areas are going to be a nose and cheeks, so you can trace around those, because we're gonna put just a tiny bit of pink in it to make him look like he has rosy and kind of jolly cheeks. And depending on what you did with the beard, this could either stay white, or you could do it a little bit more flesh tone, because if you wanted to, you could actually make this look like it was just a mustache, and it could have a look to it that it was a little bit more of an elf instead of Santa Claus. But if you do the white beard underneath, it definitely gives a little bit more of a Santa Claus feel to it. And we're doing the flesh tone before the hat, so we can let the background dry just a little bit while we're working on that. You can always feel free to use a hair dryer and come back to a different part of your project. And now we're actually going to do the nose and the cheeks, but we're going to do a little bit of a different mixing together. So you can still use your square brush and wash it out. Because I'm at an art studio and I have some different brushes, I'm just going to go in with my brush and do a different style of brush. This is called a round brush. If you have one at home, you could absolutely use it. So I want to make him have a little bit more of a pink looking nose and cheeks. So I could take my white and my red, and when I mix those together, it makes pink. The more white, the lighter pink. So if you want a very, very, very faint pink, you would take barely any red and a lot of white, and it would be very, very light. So I'm going to make a very light pink, and I'm going to paint in his cheeks a nice little rosy pink right up against his mustache. And I'm going to do the same on both sides. I mixed enough to make sure that this has the same color on both cheeks. And instead of painting my nose pink, I'm going to take a tiny bit of my flesh tone, and I'm going to mix that flesh tone in with my pink so that his nose just looks a little rosy. It just looks a tiny bit pink. I don't want it to look super pink. So by adding a little bit of flesh tone, it just makes it look a little bit more realistic instead of so kind of bright pink. I'm gonna let that to continue dry a little bit more. Well, look right here, I got a little bit of red on my picture. So try to make sure you're painting and being neat and tidy. Try not to get those wet areas smeared. But I am gonna go into my red, and I'm gonna start to do my Santa hat. I'm gonna switch back over to my square brush for my red. Make sure you wash your brush out really well, meaning that you push this paintbrush all the way to the bottom. You give it a little bit of a swish, push it down really hard against the bottom there. Not so that it goes like this and that the bristles spread. Like if you see this paintbrush is starting to be pushed like this near the bottom, but you want to do something where you're pushing your paintbrush near the bottom like this and kind of flexing it back and forth to clean it. So when you're pushing it back there, you're not making it kind of spread apart. It's always good to dry your brush so that your picture doesn't get real soupy and watery. All right, now we're ready for the hat. So we already talked about how as we get more and more close to the end of our project, we want to try and go a little bit more slowly as we're painting, because we don't want to start to paint over things by accident. So when we paint around those circles, we want to go really slow. We want to try to butt right up against where our white ended. We want to try to go right against where our green ended. outlining first is always a great idea. And we really try to make our kits for a lot of different age groups. So if you're an artist that's been painting for a little while, you could do this yourself. If you're a new artist, you can absolutely ask somebody more experienced than you to do it for you. These circles can be tricky because it's always hard to have them perfect. There's always a little bit of a wobble to them. But guess what? You're not perfect, so that's super normal for your circles to not be perfect. When I drew the circles on the kit for you, I used a stencil, so that's why they looked so perfect. It wasn't something that was freehand, and that's okay. Smoothing out those bigger blobs as we go. I don't know about you, but I always hold my breath when I get really close to some of the different spots that I'm trying to be careful of. Make sure you're breathing. I'm wearing a scarf today, and some of the lint of my scarf got into my paint. It's a little silly. Area to outline, then I can start to paint the rest of it in. That's the hardest part. So now I can be a little bit more free when I paint this in now that I've outlined. So one thing that looks really nice together are your red and green. Obviously we know those as Christmas colors, but they are also something called complementary colors. So artists use something called a color wheel to help them learn about colors and to discover what colors look nice next to each other. Red and green are opposite on the color wheel. They are complementary colors. That means that they make each other stand out and look really good when they're next to each other. So as you're painting, if you're like, oh yeah, my project looks awesome, it's because you're using these great Christmassy complementary colors to help really bring life to your picture, which is fantastic. Sweet, now we have one of the parts that I really like, but I know that some people don't like this part because it makes them pretty nervous sometimes. This is where we're going to do the eyes and then some outlining. So I'm going to take my black and I'm going to do these little circles of the eyes. And this next part is totally up to you. After you're done with the eyes, we are going to outline everything else. Everywhere that there was a pencil line, we are going to paint over that with black. And if that makes you really nervous, one of the options you might want to do is you might want to let this totally dry, and you might decide that once it's completely dry, not just with a hairdryer, but like a good overnight dry, you might want to continue outlining this with a Sharpie. That way your whole project's dry, you have a little bit more control over it. It's a marker instead of a paintbrush, so you can be a little bit more sturdy and stable as you're working with your marker. So for those of you that might be a little bit nervous about doing the black outline, a Sharpie's a good way to go if you feel nervous about that. You don't have to outline it. I like how things like this tend to look outlined because I think it does a great job by kind of making sure that it stands out really nice, but you don't have to do that. When I'm outlining, I like to turn my paper many times so that I can always kind of start up high and pull my paintbrush down towards myself. Something that's difficult is the more confident you are, the better your line will turn out. So if you're really nervous and you have a really wobbly line, then that'll show when you're painting. So if you can, try to be confident with your brush stroke, stick to it. It's okay if some spots are a little bit thicker and some spots are a little thinner, that's all right. you'll be good. So like I said, you could choose to outline all of it. You could choose to outline some spots, but not others. I'm choosing to actually outline most of it. Like I said though, I like that. I'm an outline junkie. Outline everything. Outline it all. For me, I feel like doing it with paint's a little faster, but of course I've had a lot more practice than some of you that are just kind of beginning. Try and keep those hands clean. Try and make sure your paint's dry. And you can outline your circles, or you could do something kind of fun in the middle. You could always kind of give them a little kind of quirky half outline. You could do something like this, where you just kind of do a little outline. And here and there is kind of a little fun, whimsical little swoop. That way you're not really committing to the whole thing. It's not as nerve-wracking. It's a little bit more playful. I still hold my breath when I do it, but that's okay. You have something that looks really fun and festive for the holidays. If you want to, I just outlined some stuff with black, but you could always toss some different highlights into your hat if you want to. Just a few areas to maybe show that there's light on there. You could add those little lines around your circles too, especially if you added some of those black outlines. This could help really give it that extra playful, fun look to it. I mean, come on, Santa's super jolly, so are his elves, so we want to give that picture a feeling of happiness. And one of my favorite parts, you can do two different things. You could give your little eye a little swoop, or you could turn your paintbrush over. You could give your eye a little dot to bring it to life just a little bit. But when you add that little highlight to it, it just gives it that illusion of life, which is much more exciting than just having it be stagnant and stale. So that is our really fun little Santa Claus. Please don't mind the little paint drop that I got on him. You could always try and see if you can cover that up a little bit with a little bit more white paint. A little bit better, might take a couple coats. But we can't wait to see yours, so be sure that when you're done, you take a picture of it, you toss it on Instagram, Facebook, tag us in it, talk about how fun it was and that you can't wait for the next one, and we'll keep creating more, and we can't wait to see your awesome artwork.